No radio? No problem. Stream us live on saga960am.ca. You are listening to New Theory Radio.
And welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. It feels good to be back here in the studio. I took a bit of a week off. Mainly, it was a good reason why I took a week off, because of the birth of my daughter, Nola, who's probably not listening to this. She's probably sleeping or enjoying some milk. But yeah, I had to take a week off because my daughter was actually born 2 to 3 days before. And yeah, it's been a crazy 2 weeks. It's been beautiful. I've been enjoying fatherhood so far. It's definitely different. Definitely nothing that I was used to before. I did actually a few months ago did a show around the theories around fatherhood, where I got to talk to different fathers. One being a host here on Saga 960 AM, Ryan Gertran, as well as the other being my dad himself, Major Nanwa. And it was a great show a few months ago. I think it really got me ready for what I've been experiencing so far. And maybe we'll do another episode, maybe the next Father's Day, just to kind of recap and see how I'm doing as a dad, because it's definitely different. But regardless, it feels good to be back here on Saga 960 AM. It's we got a jam-packed show lined up for you for the next 2 hours. I'm actually going to be joined by two amazing individuals. One of them is an artist here that's based in the GTA. His message is pure. Probably one of the best lyricists that I've seen live. Really command a stage when he performs. And I'm very excited to have him on the show, because we've been trying to get him on the show for quite some time. It is my boy Razim, aka Raz. He will be joining us on the show to talk about a few topics. As well, we'll also be joined by another individual who has some roots in hip hop and spoken word. He's currently a podcaster / radio host himself on Ruckus Avenue Radio, which is available on Dash Radio on dashradio.com. His show is called Awoken Word, and he's also a documentarian. I met him a few years ago at Filmy, the South Asian local movie festival, and at the time he was promoting a film called Slum Gods, which talked about the hip hop scene in India. And he's another kindred spirit, someone that I've been trying for a while to get on the show, and that's my boy Anuj Rastogi. So both Anuj and Raz are going to be joining me, and we're going to be talking about a number of different things on today's show. First and foremost, we're going to talk about York University. So earlier this week, a brawl actually erupted at York University when a Jewish student group held an event with ex-Israeli soldiers, which was met by a bunch of protesters. And this incident really put the idea of freedom of speech under a microscope. And Doug Ford himself chimed in on it. John Tory chimed in on it. There was increased security at York University because of it. And I wanted to get Anuj and Razim to actually talk about this and really, I want to get their theories on the idea of free speech, specifically when it comes to educational institutions. Because if you ask me, a lot of my thinking when it comes to my opinions and just how I feel about certain things and the way that I perceive life, a lot of that was rooted based on my university experience, based on the people that I met, based on the things that I was exposed to. And university is kind of that safe space. And when I say university, I also mean college as well. It's kind of that safe space where you can truly find yourself. So the fact that we had an incident like this take place, where again, you did have dueling sides going at it, is there a potential threat in reducing free speech in an institution that's focused on education and not allowing people to think differently? I don't know. I want to get Raz and Noosh to chime in on that with me, and that's going to be a fantastic conversation. I do also, the next topic we're going to talk about is environmentally friendly touring when you're a musician. So Coldplay released their new album this week, and Chris Martin said in an interview with the BBC, when asked about a tour, he said that the band wasn't going to tour because they were searching for an environmentally friendly way to actually do that. I saw Coldplay in concert back in 2017 at the Sky Dome. And honestly, one of the best live shows I've ever seen in my life. They had all the pomp, all the circumstance. They had confetti. They had lasers. They had lights. They had everyone in the audience was wearing like this glowing bracelet that would change colors depending on what song was being played. It was a very elaborate production, but it looks like Chris Martin and company are now rethinking some of these elaborate productions and rethinking the way that they're actually executed. And being that both Anuj and Raz are both musicians, and being that the fact that live performance is a big important aspect for the both of them, I want to get their thoughts on the idea on making live performances environmentally sustainable. So do we look at solar powered electricity? Do we look at venues that aren't necessarily big time concert arenas, but maybe more venues that are outdoors? I don't know. And I want to get Anuj and Raz's thoughts on that, and it should be another interesting combo. The other thing I want to talk about is we are going into the end of 2019. Can you believe it? It's November 24th, which means I think there's about 5 or 6 weeks left in the year, which is nuts. This year just flew by. We're going to be seeing clearer as we approach 2020. I think that's an analogy a lot of people are going to be using. And we're getting a lot, not only year-end lists, but we're getting a lot of like decade based lists regarding different categories. And the one that I want to pick their brain on that we'll talk about is a list that Complex Magazine put together around the creatives that define the 2010s, and they're really focusing on film and entertainment. And it was an interesting list because you had people like Jay-Z and Kanye and Lena Waithe and a bunch of these people that were on this list that, because of their contributions to film and entertainment, they were truly the ones that defined this decade. And, we're going to talk about that and see whether we agree with it, whether we disagree, whether there's anybody else that should be included. Because, when people make lists, there's always omissions. There's always people that feel like this person should be ahead of this person. So it should be another interesting conversation. And then we are going to end it all with another theory around some people's favorite food, which is romaine lettuce. It looks like romaine lettuce is still considered something unsafe due to a possible E. coli outbreak in one of the facilities, I believe in California. Yet it's still being sold at some grocery stores, some restaurants. I saw it actually on a menu a few days ago in a pita wrap, and I was a little worried about that because, when something has an E. coli outbreak, it's definitely not safe to eat. I know a lot of people that have actually eliminated romaine lettuce completely out of their diets because they're just terrified about the chemical or the bacteria that's associated with that product. But the fact that it's still readily available, and the fact that the CFIA has pretty much told retailers and grocery stores and restaurants, hey, if you can still sell it if it's grown elsewhere, does that concern you? Like, I find that if all of it is, or if majority of it's covered in E. coli, why not just get rid of it? I don't know. And maybe Raz and Anuj have some strong feelings around romaine lettuce as well. It should be quite the conversation as we talk about some people's favorite topping on a sub. I don't know. But we are going to take a quick commercial break here on New Theory Radio. When I come back, we are going to start theorizing, and we're going to get things going here on News Talk Saga 960 AM. Back here on News Talk Saga 960 AM. Shout outs to Amik, he's in the building as well. Nice jacket, buddy. New Theory Radio. And yes, we are live here on News Talk Saga 960 AM. Thank you so much for joining us. Apologies for the radio rust. It's been a couple weeks since I've done this show live on a Sunday, because even the one I did the week before last week was actually pre-taped. Spoiler alert, but it was a fantastic show. It actually repeated last week, so it's been great. And yeah, it's about that time that we start getting into the week's topics and we start theorizing. And let's go and let's introduce our panelists for the week. I'm going to start with the individual that's currently sitting to my left. He is one of the dopest MCs that I know in the GTA. If you don't know what MC stands for, it's Master of Ceremonies, but he's an awesome rapper. That's the context that I'm using here. And he's been blowing up, man. He's been playing a lot of different shows, racking up a lot of views on YouTube, a lot of streams across all streaming platforms. Every time I see him on socials, he's always working on something different, and he's always enlightening the world, which is what I love to see. It is the homie Raz. Raz, thanks so much for coming on You Theory Radio, man. It's about time.
Hey, man. Thank you for having me. Yeah, we were trying to put this together for a little while.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Glad it worked out.
Because I remember I saw you perform, was it a year ago? Well, it was the one sound drive. No, it was April, right? It was at the Rose, yeah. With Taboo.
April, yeah.
Yeah.
April.
Fantastic performance, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was just like the energy, the fact that you and Taboo were killing it. Taboo's your producer, obviously. So
yeah. He
was rocking it on the drums, and yeah, man, I remember just like feeling so uplifted and so empowered after your performance, because it was straight MCing, but I saw a lot of the rockers that were in the audience really rocking out to it too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm glad that's how it kind of made you feel. I have an interesting mix, I think, of like that rock. Yeah. I have an interesting mix of like that rock hip hop mix.
Yeah.
So I find that either way, there's always something that you can take from it, depending on what kind of music you listen to or what background you come from.
I find that as soon as you got hip hop with a live music element, all of a sudden it just broadens the scope. Like I remember seeing Jay-Z's Unplugged, like back in 2001.
MTV Unplugged.
Yeah. And I remember he was performing with the Roots, and the Roots is like one of my favorite hip hop groups as well. Sure. And just seeing him do that and seeing him take a live music twist on some of his classic songs. Like I know a lot of people that really listen to rock, but they became Jay-Z fans because of that album, because of just the way it sounded, the way it was put together, the musical composition of it.
Yeah, that MTV Unplugged was like iconic.
Yeah.
Especially when he did things like Big Pimpin' and stuff.
Yeah.
With like a live band.
Or like a bongo.
And then a band like the Roots. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And a band like the Roots, like obviously it's gonna be dope with a band like them. I've always leaned towards the live music route. I used to write a lot of spoken word and poetry.
Oh,
and,
interesting.
For me, the bass, like a typical hip hop loop, was harder for me to really feel and put my emotion into.
Yeah.
But I was able to do that a lot more with just like acoustic guitar.
Awesome.
Or straight piano.
Do you play any instruments yourself too?
I can lay chords down on a piano, and I can play a little bit of guitar, enough to like create, but then I get people like Taboo. Shout out to Taboo.
Yeah, shout out to Taboo.
Taboo Music.
He's killing it too.
Yeah, he's crushing it. And then when I meet people like him, I'm like, I'm going to let you do that. I'll just keep writing and doing the vocals. But,
hey, man, it doesn't hurt to play your position, bro, at the end of the day.
Sometimes you have to for a little while.
Sometimes you have to. I love it. I love the honesty. And speaking of spoken word and poetry, the next guest I have is another individual who's very much rooted in hip hop culture as well. I referred to you as a podcaster, but then like when I met you, you were like a documentarian, because you remember that was when I met you was at the Filmy movie festival. You were promoting Slum Gods, which like now in hindsight, dude, I feel like that documentary is like ahead of its time, because the hip hop scene in India is crazy, especially when you have like Gully Boy.
Yeah, there's a whole story behind that, because the night that actually took place was actually, I found out, one of the most pivotal moments in Indian hip hop.
Yeah.
Because I actually just had Shantanu Pujari on my podcast, and he's the guy that's beatboxing through much of that cipher. And he's actually one of the, at 23, he's actually one of the OGs of the hip hop scene, and a lot of these other cats.
23, you're an OG.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy, but that's how we met. But I'm a chameleon.
Yeah, and the voice you're hearing is Anuj Rastogi, the host. We'll just plug your podcast / radio show, Awoken Word, on Ruckus Avenue Radio.
Sure, Radio. I host the podcast called Awoken Word, and I'm really interested in exploring the human experience and human connectivity through conversations with people who are very different from myself. Everyone from the guy who invented the lightsaber to activists to spoken word poets, hip hop artists in India, actresses who have become monks, It's just kind of all over the map. But being human is pretty interesting.
No, it is. And I think that when you have the opportunity to kind of document some of these journeys, you do relate somehow, because even if it's a nugget of something that a person is feeling, it may relate to something that you're currently going through in life.
For sure. Yeah. And that's actually the thing. I think that's the thing about hip hop in particular, and especially having met these guys 4 or 5 years ago, and then it coming full circle, seeing Gully Boy come out. Yeah. You see the power of an idea, the idea being, in this case, hip hop, what it's actually meant to people and the way that's transformed people in people's lives is just astounding.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, it is. It totally is. Shout outs to Raz and Anuj for joining us here on New Theory Radio. I want to get right into it, because I thought when I was thinking about what we should talk about this week, this story really resonated with me, mainly because I don't know about the both of you, but I was one of those kids in university. I was like very involved. Like I did a lot of student clubs. I was like the president of the South Asian Society, which I probably shouldn't have been, but whatever. But like I found that I was involved in a lot of student clubs because it was an ability to meet new people, but it was also the ability to kind of learn things about yourselves. Like I think about my business career now, a lot of what I learned was through running, like parties in university or running events, and like being able to, understand the financing and the marketing that goes into these things. And the story that I'm talking about was, so at York University, which is one of the central GTA universities here in Toronto, a brawl erupted when a Jewish student group held an event with ex-Israeli soldiers. There was protesters there pretty much disputing it. The incident pretty much put freedom of speech in question. You had Premier Doug Ford come out condemning the entire incident, talking about how York University should have done better. Then you had people like Mayor John Tory who were condemning it, but were also saying, hey, look, we shouldn't restrict freedom of speech. Like, that's what universities are for. And that's where I really thought about this differently, was the fact that should we be restricting freedom of speech in educational institutions, even if you disagree with the issue, even if we disagree with what's taking place? Because I think about university when I was there to University of now, it'd be quite fascinating considering the political climate, or considering the political election that we just had a few weeks ago, felt like a few months ago, a few weeks ago. The types of clubs or the types of associations that might be brewing because of these ideologies being out in the open. So let's just start with there. Like, what's your theory on freedom of speech and the role it can play in educational institutions? And are you for somewhat restricting it just to have a deeper conversation? Or do you think no matter how you feel, it should be a conversation that needs to happen on an ongoing basis? And maybe Anuj will begin with you.
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation, because these forces have been at play for a number of years, not just, in Canada. You see less of it here, but you see a lot more of it in the US, especially as society gets more polarized between the right and the left. And I don't think that universities in particular should be daycares. Like, the real world doesn't care how you feel. Yeah. Right? So you either grow up or you don't. And if you can't handle someone else's idea of what they think is true or what they think is right, and if you can't have a conversation about it, then I don't think we're setting ourselves up and new generations for the world properly, right? As far as freedom of speech goes, I really don't know where the line is exactly in terms of what you should and shouldn't be able to say. You can't say it without expecting that there would be some consequences, but there really is never a good reason for violence, period. That, it should just never come to that. And I think when we talk about anything to do specifically with the Middle East and with the Palestine-Israeli situation, it's just such a hotbed of so many emotions for so many people. You want to protest. I don't think that there should be any issue with that. If someone feels like they want to hold an event there, that's cool too, but it shouldn't have to escalate to violence. And I think that we've done a poor job in the last 10, 15 years of really getting people to talk to each other. Yeah. And sometimes maybe you got to yell at each other a little bit. You got to you just got to let it out. But you can't just pretend it doesn't exist. Yeah. Say that too many feelings are going to get hurt and then park that conversation, because then it just spills out into the streets, and that's not helpful for anyone. Especially
when you look at York University, like there is a strong Jewish contingent at that university. Right. Like I remember even being there for a summer last year doing like a Seneca at York program briefly for the summer. They took all the major Jewish holidays off. So, for me, when I look at the freedom of speech argument, I'm in agreement with you. Like, I think you shouldn't restrict it. You shouldn't restrict it as a preschool or something that needs to have rules. Like, I think ultimately universities are made for that purpose. But like I almost feel like if you're York University and you knew these events are taking place, like you should know, hey, this could stir up a lot of issues because of just the institution that we are and where we're based. Raz, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, you kind of led right into it. I agree completely with what you said, Anuj. That's a really good point I think you made on university's not a daycare. I like that a lot because for me, I'm like, university should be a place, and it was a place for me where you can expand your mind and you can expand your opinions, and my opinions and perspectives changed a lot. I was out at Western, but at the same time, it's a place where you also have to learn how to grow up.
Right.
And that's not to belittle the political part of what happened at York, and like you said, that hotbed, because there are some topics I think that right now do stir up a lot more emotion. They're a lot more complex. I'm not an expert on it, so I'm not going to get into it.
Yeah, no worries.
That would be irresponsible of me. Mm-hmm. But if you step back and you look at York and freedom of speech in general, I would 100% agree. It's not a daycare. So we do have to, it is a place that maybe not in your first year, maybe not in your second year, but as you finish your years at university, that you realize that the real world doesn't necessarily care if you're upset.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But they do care about how you react or how you retaliate when you're upset. That could give you a stronger reputation, your reaction, rather than what you said or what you believe in, which could be good or bad. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I don't think if you start restricting that freedom of speech, I mean, Canada's built on diversity. My parents come from the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. We have a strong, you can't even pick one like culture or background. Toronto, especially if you're at York, it's such a commuter school.
It totally is.
It's a huge population, so it's just it becomes a huge grapevine if you like Anuj, you said, if you try to restrict it, and like where does that lead to? The only thing I do think is on York University's side, I don't know who specifically organized the event or if the university itself was involved, but I do think that it is, in my opinion, it falls on the university to at least understand what the nature of the event is that's happening. Mm-hmm. And maybe if I had to give any type of suggestion, if it matters, coming from me, but maybe understand what that situation is, understand that it's a hotbed and that the emotions at this specific event could get high, understand that there's protests, and maybe it's just a matter of security. Just understanding the nature of what's happening and finding a better way to facilitate it. And again, that might have been done, but obviously if a brawl broke out, there could have been more, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, just think about how different the headline would be, or perhaps it might not even exist if, one group organized this event and then a bunch of people sympathetic to the Palestinian cause showed up and protested, and that was it.
Yeah.
Nothing else happened. It might not even make the news cycle, or if it made the news cycle, it would be like there was another peaceful protest in Canada, and that was that, right?
Yeah.
It didn't need to come to violence, but I do agree. I think there is an onus on the administration to understand who's organizing the event, what's the context in which this is happening, but I'm also a little bit sympathetic to just administrations in general in a place like this that's so diverse and multicultural. I think we kind of expect, I'm using the term loosely, but I think we expect of the white intelligentsia that runs things or most things to understand everybody's beef. So you could have, you could have a Tamil group that shows up on campus that is organizing some sort of event, and there would be some, friction there. You could have Palestinians and Israelis. You could have, Indians, Pakistanis. Like, someone's going to bring up their thing. Currently, it could be Hong Kong versus mainland China or Taiwan, and everyone's got some sort of baggage, and it's so hard to keep track of all of that. So I think as like citizens, it's on us to like actually just be responsible with how we engage with each other, right? And so I think part of that is in university. When someone says something you don't like, don't shut up the person that said the thing that you don't like, because maybe you need to learn something from it. Maybe like you were saying, Raz, like you got to grow from that. You got to challenge, because I didn't come into university and come out the exact same person. I had to grow. Right?
Exactly. You needed to. And I think back to when I was in university and just seeing, and in hindsight, it was horrible, but like seeing LGBTQ groups get scrutinized when they're doing like pride parades in our student center, and like you have people making cheap remarks about them for no apparent reason because at the time they didn't know any better, or some people really being offended with the fact that Muslim students could leave class early and go pray because it was Ramadan season, right? Like things like that really stuck with me. And at the time when I was like 20, 21, 22, like I didn't really kind of get it. I was like, okay, cool, to each their own. But in hindsight, I'm like, man, it was horrible. Like some of the things that I was seeing and some of the things that I was hearing. And I think in hindsight, it was because people, to your point, people didn't really know any better.
Right.
And I think there's a great teaching moment here for your university, no pun intended, because it's an educational institution. But I think
you're a dad jokes.
I know, dad jokes all day. It's
starting
officially
already.
dad now. I know, it definitely has. But I think there's an opportunity here for York to either find a way to allow these voices to be heard in an environment that's safe, that encourages conversation. But you run that, but I think, with the way today's climate is, everyone's really uber passionate about these types of things. Like I know some people that literally, like, when you talk about Donald Trump with them, like if they're a big time Trump supporter, like they'll debate you till the cows come home.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the nature of our economy nowadays, or our society, is that people get uber passionate about a lot of these things, which isn't bad, but it's also very confrontational at the same time.
But I think even that word safe, though, safe has got to be, it's taken on this, this bubble, right, type connotation. It should be, you should be safe from violence or the threat of violence or the threat of harassment or whatnot. And even hate speech is like it's one of those things, like I think most people would agree it shouldn't be, I kind of feel like it shouldn't be accepted as a norm, but where do you draw the line on what's hateful and whatnot? Like to actually legislate that, you'd need to figure out some agreeable line for that, and that's tricky. But in a culture, like we don't accept certain things. Like here, for example, in Canada, if someone buds in line in front of you, like when you're waiting at Booster Juice or whatever, getting like Jays tickets, like people just don't put up with that here.
No, they don't.
But if you go to other countries, it's just the norm, right? I think it's on us to establish norms that just make it really difficult to do things that we don't think should be done. But you can't legislate everything.
No, you can't.
And even if there is legislation, like, it's hard to enforce that.
Yeah, of course.
Especially at a university.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you guys saw, I don't remember, I think it was an ex-Israeli ambassador or a current ambassador, I don't know, but he went to speak at Harvard. I think it was law school.
I think I did, yeah.
And as he started speaking, the entire class got up and left.
Oh, right, yeah.
And like, for me,
it's like a silent protest.
Yeah, I was like, cool.
Yeah.
Right? You did what you had to do, and there was no violence necessary.
Yeah, the point
I'm not
was
saying
made.
like that's what should have been done here, but it's interesting to see the different ways that people handle it. And again, I believe it was Harvard Law School. And if you think about it, that's like postgraduate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they've been through
Right.
a certain level of growing, et cetera, et cetera. But it's interesting that it's also happening in so many different places. So like you mentioned, the conversation is important. Not that we have an answer, but it's important.
What do you do? Like, I was thinking about this in the context of the fact that when I was in university, there was also like political party clubs. Like there was like the Liberal Club and the Conservative Club, and then they would bring in like political candidates. Considering the last election we just had, when we had the People's Party of Canada, which who knows if they're still going to be around. Hopefully not. No prizes there. Like, what if a People's Party of Canada like university club was to start somewhere? Like, what is, like, how do you go about allowing those individuals that feel a certain way to let their voice or allow them to run events that fit those ideals without coming to fists? Like, I'm just wondering, like, is there an opportunity for a safe space, or does the university almost have to put their foot down and be like, you know what, we're staying away from politics?
I don't know where we draw the line then, right? Like, then what makes a university that doesn't allow certain groups, if politics is the arena, right?
That's
like
true
they
too,
align themselves with a party. What's the difference between that and like North Korea then? right? Like where you can't have dissent or dissent of opinion. And I realize there's a continuum and gradation of that.
Yeah.
But like where do you draw the line? Because somebody's making that decision based on some agenda then. Or do we figure out how do we allow people to find like voices? How do we educate ourselves properly enough so people can have the discourse, have that opinion? I mean, like the People's Party got nowhere this election. Like they just
Absolutely
completely
zero.
got shut down. Meanwhile, the Bloc, which is kind of bizarre, but a separatist party is on the national stage. So you just don't know how these things are going to play out. But we couldn't. I don't know. I don't know what makes us different than any state that clamps down on people.
Yeah, if you were to go in that direction, for sure. It's like a can of worms that you open up of like, where does that line get drawn now?
It's also interesting when you think about funding as well, because like I remember when I was a student club president, you would apply for funding from your student union, and they would give you like a couple $100, but then again, like some of these clubs, they have the ability to apply for funding as well, and I don't know, it's interesting, and I always find that when you go to some of these commuter universities are the ones that really, because people are living at home and are going into those universities versus living on campus, like that's where you find a lot of maybe I'm just generalizing, but then I spent some time at UTM in New York as well, like just seeing the kinds of like posters and club events that take place, like they are very specific.
It's definitely different than when I was at Western.
100%. Even when I was at Mac,
100%. And that Western's kind of like a bubble. It's like it is the community in London for the most part. Yeah, like things die down in the summers and
summertime.
When you're on campus, they have their own grocery store. It's like you're really centralized. Right. And that's a good point. Like I've been through Mac a lot and UTM, and it's just the type of posters and events you see running. I'm sure that they're happening at Western, but it's advertised and pushed different. It's just I think the rhetoric's different in general.
I think every school's it's based on where it's located and the demographic around it is so different. Because I've gone to school now at University of Alberta, at U of T, and at York at Schulich. And all three were completely different. And I find one thing with York that's interesting, because of where it's located, it gets a lot of the commuters from the 905 and whatnot. I think a lot of people, and again, I'm making sweeping generalizations here with little basis other than anecdote, but a lot of people may not be interacting and bumping shoulders with all the same people in the subways and the trains that someone going downtown might be, right? So I think your life experience can be a lot different depending on where you go to school. Whereas like, Western, I'd spent, some amount of time out, and you're right, it's like a community, like you're there. So
Anuj, where'd you go for university?
So I did my undergrad at U of A, part of it U of T, and then I did my MBA at Schulich.
Crazy, man. So like so three different experiences, because U of A, University of Alberta, and in Edmonton, right? Yeah, and then that's fascinating.
But I mean, if you live in the community and you're gonna have like you've got beef with somebody and you're gonna see them tomorrow, it kind of changes the dynamic.
No, it does.
Everybody gets a little quieter when they know they have to face that person.
Yeah, because there's a human. There's a human on the other side of that.
One of the things I think about, and again, this article really got me thinking. And even though I'm someone to, we talked about this earlier, I don't want to get involved in sort of the issue at hand because I don't have an informed opinion to speak about it. But the university has really connected with me because I remember running South Asian parties, and historically these South Asian parties were known to have a lot of fights and a lot of disagreements, and there would always be something happening, and thankfully no one ever got seriously hurt, but there would always be like a big fight at the end. And I remember there was like institutions in Hamilton that say, hey, we don't want brown jams. Like they actually said that. At the time I'm like, oh, okay, that sucks. 10 years later, I'm like, oh, that's kind of racist. Like, that's flat out racist. Like, you're flat out like I remember one of the promoters telling me, don't play Bungar music, because as soon as you play that, we're going to shut down your party, because that creates all the fights. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm 21, just trying to, make sure I break even. Now it's 31. I'm like, man, that's kind of racist for him to say that. Like, my music is going to cause issues. And, that's the one thing I find with this. And maybe we'll end on this, and we have a bunch of other topics we want to talk about. But one thing I find about this is that there's a sense of innocence that involves a university student and them being able to find themselves and them being able to figure out who they want to be as a person. Right. And my fear in all this, and I hope York doesn't do this, because, again, no issue should ever get violent. But my fear is that, you're going to have some type of restriction on people being able to find themselves. And then you're going to see more of an uproar against that. And I hope that's not taken away, because I find that, for example, if there is somebody that's a first year student that was a part of this group that felt a certain way, and they saw sort of this article and they saw the impact of just this dispute and what it's actually done kind of in the media, by the time they hit fourth year, are they learning from that? Mm-hmm. Are they actually, taking this experience and be like, you know what, maybe we didn't go about it the right way.
Right.
Like, I don't know. Like, that's what I'm trying to think. Like, I hope for York's sake that they look at this and they really find a way to not restrict people, but to allow them to learn from it.
Yeah.
Right. But, I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Going into my first year coming out of high school, I was involved in a lot of student politics, student leadership type of things. Going into first year and second university, I tried to continue it a little bit.
Yeah.
And as I got into second into third year, I realized that my perspectives were changing. And so the tactics I might have used in a lot of the activist programs or clubs I was in through high school into university.
Yeah.
For me in my growth, I realized that like these weren't working for me.
Right.
I wasn't seeing the results I wanted. So I actually stepped back and tried to learn a lot more about myself. And then from there realized actually that was a part of what led me into music. So I only started in my second year at Western, actually recording. I was like, wait a minute, I'm learning who I am and what makes me tick and what bothers me and what makes me happy, what makes me feel like I'm making a difference. And let me put my energy into that. And by the time I was in fourth year, to be honest, I cared about the social landscape of what was going on.
Right.
But I didn't react or act in the same way at all to when I got into university.
Because the maturity that you faced, right?
Yeah, for me, it was like into the music. I was like, well, if my music can go here, I see how that affects people. If my writing goes here, if I have the ability to sit on a talk show like this, I felt like I was more comfortable in that space.
Yeah.
And I pretty much stopped being a part of activist groups or protests and stuff at all. Because for me, I realized it wasn't yielding the results I wanted. But again, like you're saying, if something isn't learned through those 4 years, you could leave and just be like, yeah, the activism and the protesting's for me. Great. But if there's no growth process through that, then where does that leave us? And then like you said, Anuj, a big part of the onus is on us as students and
just think about how different the world would be if even 50% more people went through that introspection that you went through, right? I think also the other thing about university for a lot of people, for a lot of us, is just a continuation of high school, right? It's like the echo chamber, the bubble, the tribes that you form and whatnot, whether it's along ethnic lines or just interests or whatnot. But we don't take we're so busy partying and putting off studying and then cramming and all that stuff that we don't necessarily take enough time to actually just introspect and think, is this really for me? And I had windows of partying and everything, but I still took away time because I'm like, some of this stuff doesn't make any sense. I got partly involved in politics at U of A, and then I just saw how dirty the game got so quickly, and how the egos were just fighting. I'm like,
hey, it starts
early.
I know, and it starts early, and it's a good primer of what happens in real life.
Oh, for sure. And I thought A, I don't like this. This is not the game I thought it was, and B, I'm gonna suck at this game. There's just no point in me playing this.
Totally, man.
I don't even see the benefit, but I don't fault anybody for being in that because you need people doing all these things. You need people to be artists, writers, speakers. It's
just a matter.
Hosts.
Is that for you though?
Is that for you, right?
Yeah.
And there's different ways to influence the world and change the world. It doesn't have to be any one.
But let's switch gears. Both of you guys are live performers to an extent. Well, actually not to an extent. Pretty much that's what you guys do. I know Anuj, I've seen you do some spoken word. Raz, I've seen you rock the stage with Taboo on the drum. Shouts to Taboo. Another guy having a great year, killing it. Hawaii Mighty. I think a Tribe Called Red too. He's working on some bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah, with Tim.
Yeah, with Tool Man. So
he's crushing it.
So one thing that came up that I wanted to pick both your brains on, because I thought this was interesting. So Coldplay releases a new album this week. Are you guys Coldplay fans at all?
Yeah, but I haven't heard the new album.
Yeah.
I haven't heard the new album. I'm a huge Coldplay fan. But I haven't heard the new album.
I feel like everybody's a Coldplay fan.
Yeah. It actually was they informed a lot of my early
really
instrumental inspiration.
Wow,
So.
nice. Coldplay to me Coldplay is officially becoming like our generation's U2.
Oh yeah, totally.
Where you like their old stuff and the new stuff just comes out and you're like, okay, cool.
Good enough to listen to.
Yeah.
I respect you enough to buy it.
Yeah. Well, I listen to it constantly. I don't know. Like even when I was going through this album, like just when I was in the car, and it's very different. I don't even know the names. That's how much I pay attention. But it's like it's very experimental. Like I feel like now they're at a stage where they can reach and people just be like, oh, well, I still love Viva La Vida, or I still love Yellow, right? So Chris Martin is he's has a pretty strong profile. He's considered like very engaged when it comes to different issues in the world, and he had a conversation with the BBC promoting the record, and he talked about how the band is no longer going on tour unless it's environmentally friendly. I thought that was intriguing because I have a lot of friends, including both of you, that are live performers, that are artists, that produce music, that put out music. Obviously, with the way that the music industry is going, the fact that streaming is king, live performance or live shows or touring is sort of becoming the main revenue driver. I went to Coldplay's show I mentioned earlier in 2017, and it was nuts. Like they pomp and circumstance. I wonder if were you there too, Raz? At the Sky Dome?
No, I just know their shows are.
It was nuts. I bought tickets last minute because Coldplay was just one of those bands. It was like, you know what, it's a bucket list band. I gotta see them live. My sister's seen them live a bunch of times. She's like, you should go. And I remember my wife and I arrived, and they give us a wristband that lit up. They had like confetti like being shot out of everywhere.
Wristbands are synced to the music.
Wristbands are synced to the music, so it was colorful. They had like fireworks. Like it was like a show. Like it was cool because the music is good, but then they just had all this elaborate setup. So for the fact that Chris was saying this, I thought was very intriguing because to me, they are that band now that can go on tour for the rest of their lives and perform the classics and people will buy. But now they're somewhat taking a stance to wanting to become environmentally friendly, which a lot of people don't know. And Chris did mention during the interview that, hey, maybe it's having the show solar powered, or maybe it's, you know, finding a way to not have it in big venues. Maybe it is going outdoors or finding other types of ways to get this show out there. So as live performers yourself, I want to get both your theories on this. Do you think concerts can become environmentally friendly? And if they can, like, how do you see that happening? Do you see more like outdoor shows? Do you guys see maybe the concept of a live performance changing? Because when you look at any live performance, you know, the bare minimum, you're getting plugged into an amp and you're using a lot of energy to really put your music out there. Maybe Raz, we'll begin with you because I know you've been doing a couple of shows lately and absolutely killing it.
Yeah. Have you heard of Michael Franti?
No, I haven't.
A band, and he opened for John Mayer. I saw John Mayer, I was 2011 or 2012.
John Mayer's awesome. I've seen him a bunch of times too.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Crazy guitarist.
Michael Franti opened for him, and I actually found out that the Michael Franti band, I think it's called, they don't actually tour in any bus that's not like electric or
really?
Like not gas, like petroleum fueled in whatever way, and they don't use plastic water. And that was back in like 2011 or 2012. So I think there's different levels to what it means to tour in an energy efficient or saving or non-pollutive way, because one thing is the actual staging and running that energy, and if you're lighting off fireworks and et cetera, I think a lot of the other logistics come down to like what kind of tour bus are you going in? You know how much water, cases of water are backstage and on the bus,
and plastic bottles.
Like fast food, like, and I think all of that together it's an issue.
You
like I can understand why Chris Martin would bring it up because he's seen it on the high. There's very few people, save like U2, who are doing it bigger than Coldplay.
Because Coldplay, that tour I went to, was a stadium tour. So they were playing football stadiums, which are huge, like 60,000 people per show.
So I feel like if I go to do a show, I just bring my canteen water bottle.
Oh, good for you, man.
And I just do my best to like use that. Just like, oh, is there a tap around? Or whatever. And it's easier to control on that front of like the actual everyday usage of things you're using, things you're eating, things you're drinking. But if I was Chris Martin and Coldplay, and you see that you're bringing 120,000 people to a venue, and they're all drinking plastic water bottles, and they're all throwing garbage on the floor, and the stadium's left in a mess after, and your confetti is falling. You know what I mean? Like, on so many levels. And then you also have the money. Yeah. You have the backing. Yeah. A lot of the tour money and stuff usually is fronted by the label, or the promotion company, the touring company, etc. However your setup might be. And like, if you're a Coldplay, you know they're giving you the budget.
100%.
So I think on the level of Chris Martin, U2, even like a Drake, even Logic, anybody who can strictly do a stadium like world tour, I think it's a different conversation for them, because if they click into the impact they have, and then they can see how much money is being moved around. Yeah. It's like a direct impact they could have. You know what I mean? Like a very serious impact every show that they could have on that. Yeah. And I mean, if you got the money, anything's possible. That's what I've been.
It's an interesting sort of stance that Coldplay is taking. Like, I find that they probably look at this as...
It's possible.
It definitely fits their vibe. Like, I'm like, you know, if there's a band that's going to go entirely environmentally friendly and not pursue a tour until they find something that's totally sustainable that they can attach their name to, and I think that might even like be a legacy that maybe is a bit bigger than their music.
For sure. Yeah, it could
depending on how big they want to take it. It might take them a few years.
Yeah. But I love that it's Coldplay, that it's Chris Martin and Coldplay that did it, because they have pull.
It's more genuine,
right? Like, if a bunch of sponsors, and if a bunch of sponsors come and they're like, they want to jump on the tour because they know it's going to make money. Yeah. They can make that call. Be like, you can sponsor us. Yeah. But you got to do this. It's like Amazon saying that they're not going to use any delivery company or something like that. Yeah. By the certain date, if they don't have a zero, what is it? Like a net zero emissions or emissions or something like that. A net zero carbon rating or something like that. Yeah. The emissions rating. Because they have the pull. So like, they're the largest distributor in the world. So they're in the like mailing world. So they just go, hey, you can work for us, but you have to do this. Yeah. And everybody kind of falls into line. So I like that it's somebody like Coldplay, because if it was me that did it, people would be like, okay, buddy.
Hey, well, no, everyone knows you're bringing your own water bottle now, right?
Yeah, so no. At least I can get the water bottle, right? But like, people look at my hospitality rider sometimes and they're like, nope, can't do that. I'm like, okay, cool, right? What am I really going to say?
M&Ms. Rasser has the vegan cheese, the stevia, and all that.
But if it's Coldplay, you're not saying no to Coldplay. You know what I mean? So,
Anuj, what are your thoughts, man?
So I knew nothing about this until you kind of reached out and shared the article and whatnot. I read up a little bit more, and here's the journey I went through. I'm like, okay, whatever. Because I'm like, okay, admittedly, I know this is terrible to say, I'm a Coldplay fan, but I'm not like a huge Coldplay fan. I see why they're a big deal, but I'm like, they're cool. Yeah. So at first I was like, okay, it seems like a sort of a cool thing to say, right? And as I kind of read through the article, and you realize actually, a band as big as they are, and Chris Martin being as influential and as loved as he is, taking a stand like this, but then actually spelling out not just the impact of touring on commercial jetliners, of water bottles, of all that stuff, but the traffic and just the carbon footprint of all the people that come out to the shows, the water bottles they're going to consume, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You keep going. Kind of makes you mindful of all the little decisions we make in everyday life that we take for granted. Like the fact that you bring a water bottle of your own to your shows it's a little thing, but it's actually a really big deal, because you magnify that up by 1 million or 5 million people, and it changes things. Like I end up just working out of a Starbucks near my place quite often, and I almost always have like my tumbler and my water bottle with me, and I'm just still appalled by how many people who are there every day just don't have that. Like, just spend the $5 and get like a tumbler and bring that in.
Spend the $5 on the coffee anyway.
Yeah, exactly. and then at Starbucks, they've made these bins available where you can take off the lid and the sleeve and everything. You put the paper cup in one thing, the sleeve in another thing, and the cover in another, and then at least everything's sorted for recycling. But right beside it's the garbage bin, people still toss the whole thing in there. Like,
people don't even know that those wax-lined cups are not recyclable.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that.
So and you didn't know that.
and there's no excuse, I think, not to know that, right? Especially when it's right there. So I think someone like Coldplay taking a stand like this shows okay, this thing that we love, which is music, right? Which is, you know, I think the greatest invention of humanity ever. Amazing. We can celebrate this together. But if we do it this way and we continue to do this way, it actually causes a lot of harm to the planet. There should be a better way. We've got the power. We've got the clout. We can make a change in all this stuff. And you guys aren't exempt from it either. Like, if you're a fan of ours, then you should be thinking about this stuff too, right? So when I start to sort of peel the onion, like going through some of these articles, I'm like, this is brilliant. Like, this is actually really important because it's one thing, the live tour, and it's actually a whole bunch of other issues wrapped up with it that should spark a conversation and even just affect a few people in a different way.
You know what's fascinating about this is we're starting to see, and Raz, you were talking about some of the artists that do have clout when it comes to live performance, because we all know now that for an artist to make money, touring is probably number one, right? Because you're getting the
100%.
direct payment, the direct value, you're filling up a room, you're making merch money, everything, right? We're starting to see like stage shows become very, very extravagant. Like, you know, you think about OVO Fest with Drake, right? I've been the last few years, and you know, this year he brought out a replica Larry O.B. trophy. You know, I was also there the year that he made the CN Tower on stage. Like, there was these big productions that Drake was putting together, which people now have an expectation. Like, they're looking forward to what the stage design is going to be, or they're looking forward to how he's going to be incorporating different multimedia elements to make the show more engaging, more intimate. So if an artist decides to go environmentally friendly, number one, I think to your point, Anuj, I think it's fantastic. I think it's great that they're trying. I just find it intriguing as to how that's going to potentially either limit or allow for more innovation when it comes to live performance. Also, I'm a little worried about the ticket price, man, because anything environmentally friendly is typically more expensive. So, but do you feel like if you're a fan of Coldplay and you know that they're making the show environmentally friendly, and if, you know, if the ticket usually costs $100, now it's going to cost you $200 because, you know, the show itself isn't going to, you know, use that much electricity or is going to be fully solar powered. Do you think that's going to be an issue? Like, you think cost is going to be a factor for people to engage with it, or you think people will probably feel good now about going to a concert?
I don't know. When it comes to someone like Coldplay or any artist that you love at any scale, like, prices, I mean, it's material, but it's rarely an issue, right? People will find some way to go. And if you go feeling like you're, you know, if you go and you know that in addition to that, it's also supporting some sort of good cause, you're going to feel even better. And hopefully along the way, you don't bring your plastic water bottle to the gig or buy the plastic water bottle there or whatnot, right? So there's like a whole ripple effect. It might get more expensive. Maybe you need to do more shows outside. Maybe we need to actually just step away from the theatrics of crazy productions and get back to the music, which is what it should really be about.
Totally.
Like John Mayer or any great artist and a guitar, Ed Sheeran, like sitting on a stool, even unmiked, right? I mean, you can't do that with 50,000 people, but unmiked, like you see great artistry from any genre of music. You don't need anything else, right?
Yeah.
But when you have like no artistry, or it's the whole thing is just like a front, then you need a lot of theatrics, right? And there's a lot of both of those happening right now.
For sure.
I got to go to Osheaga in Montreal this past August, and the one thing I loved, the fact that what they were doing to go more environmentally friendly is one of their sponsors, I think it was National Bank, actually gave out reusable water bottles. So like that was great because like we're still using that water bottle today, but what I really loved about it is they had water stations like set up everywhere, so you could stay hydrated. You didn't have to pay for water. They were still selling water, but nobody was buying it because they were encouraging you to bring your own bottle, which I thought was great. And to your point, Anuj, like the performances that I saw, like outside of the main headliners, like a lot of them were fairly simple, but still engaging, still great. More about the music, more about the vibe, more about chilling out. Obviously, the risk that you run with outdoor shows is the weather. The weather's always a factor. But I don't know. I wouldn't mind a more grassroots approach to a lot of music because then, to your point, it makes you appreciate it more.
I think what's interesting about something like Osheaga too is if you start to learn about the logistics of having 14 different acts in a day come through on a stage, you can't set up theatrics.
No, you can't.
Right?
You can't.
If we're talking about stadium setups where the whole show, like I went to the Blueprint 3 concert.
Oh, okay. I remember that
J.
one.
Cole had
Opened
2 songs
up.
out. He opened for Wale, who opened for NERD,
Dude,
who opened for Jay-Z.
Me and Ahmed were at that same show. It was
it was
amazing.
it was
on
crazy.
Halloween.
Right? But I walked in. This is before J. Cole was J. Cole.
Yeah.
I walked
Dollar
in, and the
Dream.
lights were still on, and people were filing in, and he was performing.
Yeah.
Zero theatrics.
Yeah.
Wale went on, had a band.
Yeah.
A little bit more going on.
Yeah.
NERD came on and just
Killed it.
crushed it.
Yeah.
A little bit more theatrics, and then Jay-Z had the whole background and everything. Like, he just actually, his show is fairly simple. But,
It is.
But you know what I mean? So I think it's festivals almost, I almost want to say they should be leaning in that direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're talking about like a Coldplay setup, like there are stage builders and set builders that will work on like Marvel production
Right, yeah.
that are building these things, right?
Yeah.
It's a movie that these guys are putting on. And I think there's two things that might be one because I don't remember the other one. But the first one is I think culture is a big deal. I don't think, I mean, I'm pretty deep into it. Like, I read this stuff and I study it and I analyze it, right?
Yeah.
But I know that I'm weird and I make music, so
No, but you have to as a musician.
I have to,
though.
right?
Yeah.
It's where I'm at. But I'm realizing more and more that if you're not that deep into it, you see like this fleece kind of like cotton puffy kind of sweater styles, and you see the Letterman jackets that Drake's putting out, and you see all these different things, and it becomes the style.
Yeah.
Right? People just start wearing it.
Yeah.
Somebody who's like you, Anuj, like you said, Coldplay, yeah, they're cool. I get them. There's a lot of people like that about Drake, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. It's cool, right? If I love Drake, I might buy that Letterman jacket because I'm like, oh, it's OVO and it's Drake and I
Right.
love it. 3 people down from that might buy it just because it's nice. And yeah, I know Drake. It's pretty cool.
Right.
It's a good jacket too, right? And I think when it gets to that level of people, there's not a full understanding of how much of an impact that artist can have on a culture.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right? And I'm saying, like, if you're into hip hop, if you're into
Yeah.
music and you're into seeing culture, seeing how culture is built, you'll know this.
Yeah.
But I think we're talking about we're 7 billions of people in the world might have something, wear something, follow a certain mentality or perspective, and that actually comes down a lot of the times, which is why music is such a powerful thing, especially hip hop, such a powerful culture builder, is because they sway the culture.
Yeah.
They dictate
100%.
culture. So if what's interesting to me is I say that on the point of the cost. If you love Coldplay and you love U2 or you love Drake or you love whoever, like you were saying, Anuj, there's no price on culture.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Kanye could put out a $500 shirt, white T-shirt.
And you could say, hey,
He
it's
sold those.
organically cotton, right?
You might say it's you like this guy is crazy, but he sold them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So people are buying them, and he's dictating a culture.
Yeah.
And so I don't think the price would make a big difference if it went up that much. And at the same time, it is getting a lot cheaper to do these types of things. Like, they're doing it on much grander
Right.
scales. But at some point, we want it to become the norm. I would say to anybody who's like, nah, I'm not going to pay for that higher price ticket, I would say maybe reassess how much you actually like that artist.
Yeah.
And 2, understand that it's going to be more expensive at first, but if that's how we want things to run in the future, you need to get over that hump where it becomes the norm, right? And there's always a peak.
And
There's always
eventually
a
there's
spike,
like
and
economies
then-
of scale, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
and then hopefully it'll work itself out that way. But
You know what? And I think this is a great. And I think we touched on this before too. But I think this is a great exercise in an artist being able to use their influence. Because to your point, if you like an artist so much, you will support them. But again, if this allows environmentally friendly concerts to become a norm and more readily accessible, then I think Coldplay wins.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not as huge a fan of the top 40 artists. I mean, there's some amazing artists out there that I love. Like, I think Ed Sheeran is ridiculously talented. There's no denying it. But like, particularly in hip hop, like I've I've fallen out of love with a lot of the really big names, barring J. Cole and whatnot, but who's fantastic.
You're not a mumble rap fan?
No, you know what? Like, everyone goes through their phases, right? It's like, to me,
actually likes to hear words.
To me, mumble rap is like the mullet of rap, right? Like, it should just never happen again.
That's the best explanation I've heard.
But so I'm like my favorite rappers. A lot of them are out of the UK. Guys like Akala, Low Key. There's a guy out of the Bay Area, Locksmith. These guys are independent. They've been like hustling for years. I think they can go toe to toe with any MC, like full stop. It's just how it is. But a lot of these guys have very specific personal values, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what they're living, right? They've decided to stay away from the major label system. They've decided to stay away from endorsements. They've had so many opportunities in at least a few of their cases to run for political office or have, be a voice for the youth or whatnot.
Yeah.
But they stay away from the stuff because they know what's in the mud, right? And these guys, they're making a living. They're not bazillionaires. They're better rappers, artists, writers than many others, but they kind of stay with that narrative, with that voice. And the people that are along for the ride, they value that about them, right? Like, I respect the fact that, somebody doesn't take ad money or doesn't sign to a label or whatnot. Not that signing to a label is wrong, but if that's your thing, and that's a value you hold, I respect you for doing that, right? So in the same way, I have nothing negative to say about Coldplay, period. Like, I don't know enough about them. I do think they make great music. They're a great band. And the fact that they're able to now put a value that's important to them out into the world and hopefully get a conversation like this happening a million times over, that's fantastic.
Sorry, just real quick. Yeah. I know the thing that pushes me is exactly what you're talking about. That pushes my brand is the values I stand behind. And I started following that for personal reasons, but also for exactly what you're saying, is I started to realize that the music is just the end product. And I think that's another thing that if you're not in music, like the marketing teams understand that. They understand like Universal Music's marketing. They know that you can put out a hit song and it'll disappear. You'll make a quick buck, move on with your life. But if you're trying to build real value, people with brand loyalty buy more consistently over time.
Yep.
So, and I think that's something to remember is like when you talk about, I imagine Coldplay differently in my head because I don't hear their songs and go, yeah, I'd go see them. What I'm seeing in my head is what they value.
Right.
And when I see somebody like, I don't know, J. Cole or, let's just say J. Cole, when I see what he values and his values grow, that's what I care about. I might love 3 songs out of 16 on his album. I'm still buying it. Because I'm buying what he values, and that represents me, and that's what I think. That's a great way to explain it, Anuj. That's what I think there's no price on.
It's so funny because as you're saying that, Raz, I feel so bad for being a Kanye West fan still.
I love Kanye. I'll always be a Kanye West fan.
He's complex, like everybody.
And what I'll tell you to do, have you seen his Apple One interviews? I tell everybody this.
Well, like the ones that just happened?
The like hour and a half ones.
With Zane Lowe,
Yeah, every once in a while he puts one out.
The last one...
People don't watch those.
Yeah. I actually...
He's on another level.
No, and
he's on another level.
But that's the thing though, like even the last Kanye one, like with Zayn, before he released the album, like I remember I was moving at the time, so I was just packing stuff away and listening to it. As much as people knock him for being crazy or doesn't know what he's talking about, he has some merit, man. With like the dome housing idea, like it wasn't just a random idea. Like he actually saw how housing was being situated in Calabasas, and he was like, "No, it should be this way if you want to make it more environmentally friendly." Like I was like, "Dude's onto something."
And people don't realize the people he rubbed shoulders with. These guys dictate what fabric is going to be the most popular fabric in the world. 100%. What color is going to be, and so, I mean. It's been put out there that he's been diagnosed with a mental illness, which I think puts that to rest for me. He said some things that I definitely don't agree with. But if you actually listen to what he's saying, he's been saying these things since he started making music.
100%.
I had somebody giving me their opinion on Kanye who didn't know what late registration was. And I was like, nah, this conversation's over. You know what I mean? But anyways, that's off topic.
It's funny though, because you take you take someone like J. Cole, who I think is still independent if I'm not wrong.
He's not Rock Nation, but you know what? He rolls like an independent artist.
Yeah. But I mean, like you see someone kind of climb to like that upper echelon of pop music and stardom and whatnot. But kind of he seems like the guy that still keeps it real, and you appreciate that. But you also root for somebody like that, right? That is not like kind of inheriting, something from a parent or whatnot who happened to be a star or whatnot. Just kind of hustled and made it there. There's something to be said for that, and I think, like you were saying earlier, it might be more expensive in the beginning, so that it becomes cheaper in the end. That's what Tesla is all about, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, everything that Musk has done, it's popularized electric vehicles again after they were killed like 20, 30 years ago.
I knew I should have put Cybertruck on the topic list.
That's a great point.
It cuts through, what did I just say? It cuts through butter like a hot truck was my thing yesterday.
That's a great way to explain it. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap this conversation up, I think let's divert a little bit. What's your favorite concert that you've ever been to live? And maybe we'll do a quick roundtable. I'll start. Favorite concert will always be Watch the Throne. Jay-Z, Kanye West. I think
that was crazy.
It was like, even now I know people that regret not going because it was two artists in their prime. Jay-Z's been in his prime. Even now, Jay-Z's still in his prime. Like he's a beast. He's absolutely killing it. But seeing Kanye right after My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Watch the Throne, seeing Jay in his element after Blueprint 3 and just everything else they put together, like, and then seeing the theatrics, seeing the way the show was put together, like that will always, to me, just be my favorite show. My favorite show before that was the Blueprint 3 show I went to because I was a big Pharrell fan. At the time I was a big Wale fan. I remember like nerding out about J. Cole because I like to come up in the warm up, like were mixtapes I was listening to at the time. But Jay-Z's my favorite rapper of all time, if you guys didn't get it. But I would say Watch the Throne was my favorite show, and honestly, I don't think it'll ever happen again. I think that boat has sailed, but yeah, I think from a concert standpoint, it was my favorite. Anuj, what was your favorite show? He's going to choose something so local.
Well, so before I go there, I don't know if you've heard this, but when Jamie Foxx was on Joe Rogan's podcast, he has this whole like little story about this kid that shows up and talks to him about music and whatnot. And it's about Kanye and how they first met, and that whole thing was fascinating. It's hard to pin down like one favorite concert for me. I think the first one that I can remember going to, this probably dates me a bit, but it was in Edmonton watching Boyz II Men. I think the one and only time they actually came there.
Wow.
And this is like, I think after their second album, and I was still am a huge Boyz II Men
That's awesome.
fan. Did you grow up in Edmonton?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay, crazy, man. I thought you were just a Toronto guy.
No, I grew up in Edmonton. Yeah, and so seeing them live, like you hear it, you can hear the musicality. Like these guys were like at another level of musicality as individuals. Any one of them on their own, you put them together the way they gelled, and then you hear it in a studio album. I mean, okay, you get like there would have been multiple takes and whatnot, but to see that done live in front of your eyes, and it was at I don't know, whatever, Northlands Coliseum way back then. There's like 15,000 people in there, and we didn't have great seats. Yeah, but still to hear it come together live was just unbelievable.
That's crazy.
I've been now, I think, 2 or 3 times with my wife to Bryan Adams concerts, who I love because it was actually the first CD I ever got was Waking Up the Nagers.
The summer just passed, right?
Yeah. Nice. And he's still been doing his thing for all these years, and he's still
Bryan
the
Adams
same
is a legend, man.
Still the same dude in a t-shirt, like just love it. And you can see the love that people have for his music. And it was interesting because there's people from like their 60s down to like their teenage years that were at these shows, and then I have to add a third in, which was just a basement concert with this tabla player that I love, Anindo Chatterjee. There's like 20 people there, and he is like one of the greats on the planet. And he played. I'd seen him twice before in like proper concerts, but this was a basement thing at home. Wow. And he played a repertoire I didn't even know was possible on the tabla, and it was just. I'm old school that way. I feel like music needs to be just raw. It needs to be right there.
For sure.
Honestly, no, I'm the same way. So especially when it comes to hip hop, my favorite shows are just a DJ, a MC, just rocking a small area, just doing their thing, or seeing someone in their live music element, just like doing like a intimate show. Like I just feel like it's so much better, so much raw, and you get more engaged. Raz, what about you, man?
I have to go like a top 3 too.
Okay.
Because immediately 3 pop up into my head. So I saw Alicia.
Now I feel bad for not providing 2 others.
I saw Alicia Keys.
No, amazing,
and
man.
Robin Thicke opened for her, but this was years before
the scandal and all
he
that.
blew up and whatever is the Robin Thicke you know now. But his original music is fantastic.
Oh, Robin Thicke's album where he had "Wanna Love You Girl" on it was like classic album.
And it's from a long time ago, but it's fantastic. So it was like the vocals that night, like you're talking about Boys to Men. To see that live was Alicia Keys at one point just kicked off her heels on stage and was just going at the piano. Unbelievable. The other one was the John Mayer concert. Just from what he puts together with his guitar, and then he'll go into a solo, and it's just so as effortless in person. And we got moved right like over the stage, so I could like see his fingers on the guitar, and I was like, "This is unbelievable."
I saw John Mayer for the Continuum tour in 2007.
I saw the Battle Studies one.
Awesome. And then I saw him. What was the album? It was after Born and Raised. It was the one where he's like standing in a field. And
Paradise Valley?
Yeah, Paradise Valley. He did.
That's what it's called?
Yeah, I believe so. And
is
I
that
remember
one with the Blind Boys of album. Which one was that?
I think so. I think the Blind.
It had a little bit more of a country swing to it.
This was like 2013 or 14. And I saw him at Molson Amp or Budweiser Stage now is what it's called. And honestly, man, like there was like a 6-7 year gap between when I saw him.
Yeah.
Both shows blew me away. Like he's just one of the best guitar players out right now.
And he's one of those people you talk about with live show clout. He still pretty much just does stadiums.
That's it.
And when was the last time he had a song on the radio?
Yeah.
That's the type of culture that he's created. And then the third one was actually I saw J. Cole at like at London Music Hall when I was at West End.
Wow.
I saw him on the Born Sinner tour.
Was that with Harmon?
Wow.
It wasn't. Actually, I didn't know Harmon at it. But me and my buddy we went. And we were like 12, 15 feet from the stage.
Yeah.
And actually, Boss opened for him.
Boss is awesome.
Boss? So, and nobody knew who he was. Crushed it. Really? I immediately started like looking up his stuff. And that show was cool because that sticks out to me because J. Cole now, it's fascinating to me that I still really want to see his concert. Because for the most part, I'm like, if I can get good tickets to a John Mayer concert, I'll go. And I love John Mayer. But I saw him once and I'm like, I'm happy with that, right? I saw Alicia Keys once. I'm like, I'm happy. To be honest, even though I make music, I'm not a huge concert goer.
Yeah.
But J. Cole is like, when I saw him, it was unbelievable. But now he's a completely different person. You know what I mean? So that one sticks out to me because
it's fascinating when you.
It was also raw, like you were saying.
Totally
completely
raw.
Yeah.
I've seen Rihanna 3 times. I saw Rihanna open up for Kanye, the Glow in the Dark tour. Then I saw her do a solo show when she had her Rated R album in Montreal, and then I saw her when she came back to Toronto like 2-3 years ago with the Anti album. And what I love about that is I got to see Rihanna grow because when she was doing the Kanye stuff, it was very poppy.
Right.
Rated R was like very very like elaborate, but then when she came back for Anti, it was like a mix of everything because you can tell like she's now a seasoned artist. She knows what to do and how to do it. Quick story on Boss, and we'll go commercial breaks. I know we're kind of extending our segment here, but Osheaga 2014, Boss came out during J. Cole's set. My buddy and I are outside waiting for our Uber. Boss and the entire Fiends crew is just hanging out. And Boss comes up to us for directions.
No way!
So Boss is like, yo, we're trying to get to Suwoo. And then we're like, yo, you're Boss, man. You killed it on stage. Like, yeah, thanks, man. You know, we're trying to go to the after party, yada, yada, yada. He's like talking about it.
That's awesome.
Fast forward this year, we're at Osheaga, and Boss is playing one of the main stages. Yeah. Honestly, man, it was like one of those things. I remember, like, because my wife actually has become a Boss fan, especially with his most recent album, Milky Way. And it was kind of cool, man, because you're like, okay, you get to see this guy, this rapper, he's totally humble, like, you know, hasn't let anything faze him. He's just like opening for J. Cole, just kind of chilling, you know, asking random people on the street for directions because he's just trying to get to an after party. And now he's like rocking, like 5 years later, he's rocking a full crowd. People are rhyming with him. It's just like, man, it's good to see, man. So it's good to see one of the good artists kind of, you know, get his clout. And he seems like he hasn't changed too. Like he just seems like he's found his niche and he's found his fan base and he's going about it. So that's awesome. You know, we do have about half an hour left. I want to talk about 2 things. Number one, we are kind of approaching the tail end of the year. I think there's about 5 to 6 weeks left. With sort of the end of the year is when you start seeing like the year-end lists pop up. But because we're heading into 2020, I'm starting to see a lot of like decade end lists that are also popping up, and Complex Magazine's an outlet that I follow quite regularly because I think they're pretty on top of it when it comes to news and just what's going on in sort of hip-hop culture. So they had their team put together a list that they called the creatives that define the 2010s, and they describe it as actors, writers, directors, and others that changed television and film this decade. I'm assuming that eventually they'll do one for music as well. But I wanted to pick both your brains about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to scroll and just choose a random actor, writer, director. I just want to get both your thoughts on whether you think they did make a contribution during this decade regarding entertainment and just how it's being perceived. And one name specifically that I wanted to just pinpoint that came up as I was scrolling was Ryan Coogler.
I knew you were going to say Ryan Coogler. I just knew it.
So Ryan Coogler is the director of Black Panther, the director of Creed, Fruitvale Station. I think he's also getting now into producing, and he's also getting now into writing as well. Just somebody who's absolutely just pushing the envelope when it comes to the types of stories that are now being depicted and within sort of movie culture. I think the fact that he helmed Black Panther and that's officially now kind of changed the narrative of what a superhero could look like, I think is a huge contribution. Like one thing that really resonated with me was my little nephew has like a Marvel toy set of like these Marvel superheroes that are like in a car. And, you have your Iron Man, you have your Thor, you have your Incredible Hulk, but you had Black Panther in there too. And I was like, this... Like, if you ask anybody who's a basic Marvel fan, like 5-10 years ago, what's Black Panther? Only a few of them be like, oh yeah, it was this, superhero. Now it's like Black Panther's like one of the main ones that comes up in the conversation. Yeah. What do you guys think? You guys think Ryan helped define sort of the 2010s? And who will begin?
Yeah, so I got two quick disclaimers. One, any of these lists are so subjective.
Oh, 100%.
And I think like just
100%.
to say that the influential on TV. For where, like, if this was a list of Indian TV, then you'd have different set of directors. If it was German or if it was South Korean, whatever. And I think there's a lot of creatives all over the world from all different voices that never get represented in these lists. But that said, Ryan Coogler, I got to give respect to. Black Panther was brilliant, I think, for so many reasons. It finally gave, it gave the West, it gave the world, I think, a model of what Black culture could be, actually is, gave something to aspire to, but it was something I think even more subtle. There's a friend of mine who's Nigerian, and we had this conversation. So when he had seen Black Panther, he thought it was a little bit of a almost a caricature of African culture, right? It's kind of based on this country that's somewhere near where Rwanda would be, and the accents were kind of all over the place. And it was funny because he wasn't sure how he felt about it, but I remember being at the theater and seeing, how people were responding to this, and he saw a bunch of young Black people dressed up as different characters from the movie, and he just didn't know what to make of it. I'm like, this is the first time that you could be Black and do cosplay, and you're not Black Batman, you're not Black Superman, you're not Black Flash or whatever. You're just that thing, and you can make it your own. It was sort of the first time that they could just kind of internalize that. And I remember when we had the conversation, he's like, yeah, I actually hadn't thought about it that way, but it's changed the way that we see, I think, Black culture in at least a little bit of a positive way, which is good.
Yeah. No, I agree. Raz, anything to add?
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a fantastic point. I think, again, on Black Panther specifically, the movie itself was a good movie. I was like, it wasn't fantastic. I didn't think it was mind blowing as a movie. I'm talking about
right. Yeah.
It was a good movie, right? It's a good Marvel movie, kind of what you expected. What blew my mind was if you just looked at it for with the accents that were used or the casting or the location, et cetera, et cetera. To me, personally, in my opinion, that has to do with the production and Hollywood and what's at your disposal and blah, 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 whatever works together.
Yeah.
To put this movie together. But for me, it was really much more metaphorical in the sense of they really brought out the fact almost in a way that Africa or these African nations don't need your help. We have a history of knowledge and beauty and art and different languages, et cetera, and we have a wisdom that very few other places, if any in the world, can say they have to that extent. That ancient wisdom that, and when I started recognizing that in the movie and that they actually put those layers in a little more nuanced and a little more in the background, like with the location or the fact that you couldn't find Wakanda. Right. And that's from the comic, right? I didn't read the comic specific, but I know that's from the comic. I liked that part of it because for me that said more about Black culture. Yeah. And just the fact that like it was more empowering to me in that way. And that's why I thought it was brilliant and why I think Coogler would be a super influential person.
And just on that too, I think it's unlike a lot of other diasporic cultures, like, you know, if you're from the South Asian subcontinent, like there's still a lot of immediate ties with whether it's India or Pakistan or Sri Lanka or whatnot. But for a lot of people that ended up in America and Canada through the transatlantic slave trade, they've lost a lot of that connection with their motherland. So this was one way of sort of, I think for some people at least, bridging that gap. And you're right. I think that they show that like it's the world coming to Africa. Africa is not going to the world. It doesn't necessarily. Everyone needs what Africa has
Which is how it was.
to offer. Right?
Settlers came there.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And they had what they wanted.
And it's still the case with like, you know, like China's buying up everything in Africa because they need resources and whatnot. But I think along the way, there's this thing in an interview I saw T.I. say that I thought was just so brilliant. He said, because he was talking about hip hop in general, how it sells shoes, it sells cars, it sells like, you know, cognac, Cavassier, everything. A lot. He's like, we sell everything and we own nothing. Yeah. Right. And it was, I think, a little bit of a testament to how generous I think just African and Black culture is. That it has created such a wealth for the entire world to share in, and yet it doesn't end up walking away with the spoils. Yeah. There was a humility there, right? But I just thought this was an interesting moment of pride. I saw it after what was not Endgame. What was the one right before it? Infinity War. Infinity War. Yeah. So I saw Infinity War first, and then I saw Black Panther, and I saw Black Panther. I'm like, yeah, it's good.
Like I was kind of as a Hollywood movie.
It was good. I liked Infinity War a lot more. But you're right. The symbolism was rich,
and I think that's one of the reasons that Black Panther is held in such high regard is because of the symbolism. Like, there's a lot of people in hindsight they're like, oh, like people were very much enamored. Like, I was one of the ones to go there on the first day it came out, and like,
I think I saw it the second day or something,
and like absolutely was like, this is it. I remember watching a bit of it with my wife, and I was like, you know what, it's good. Like, I think I like more of the culture aspect around it, and just the fact that it was such a pivotal move for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But you know, I think Ryan Coogler, man, he deserves his flowers. He did great this decade. Another name that I want to bring up is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, man. Like, talk about somebody who, you know, was, and I'm a big wrestling guy. I think everyone who listens to me through the radio knows
that you like wrestling. A little bit.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, number one. I think this decade really solidified him as being sort of that movie moneymaker, the one that, you know, you can put on the marquee and he's guaranteed to sell movie tickets. I think he's kind of shaken off a lot of the pro wrestling stuff, but he can always use it to his advantage if he needs to. It sounds like now with his own production company, he's really pushing forward on passion projects, and he's almost using that as an avenue to work on things that he's truly passionate about, while also doing the big money Fast and Furious movies and Ballers on HBO. But man, like, what a decade this guy's had, from being, you know, the decade prior a pro wrestler trying to become an actor
in Scorpion.
Yeah, Scorpion King
for 30 seconds
to now becoming.
As soon as he shed the fanny pack, everything changed.
100%. Now becoming the foil for Kevin Hart in all the Jumanji PR rounds that they make every now and again. Raz, what's your thoughts on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson?
I love Dwayne Johnson. For me, it's exactly what you said. In the way I was explaining kind of how I navigate my own career. I don't ever expect to be at a level that Dwayne Johnson's at, but the fact that he's able now at such a high level, such a high budget, such a high revenue profit, in every way, he's able to do his own projects. He kind of dictates what he does. And then he's built himself up to have the clout where he can pick and choose. And then when he gets something, he can change it and he can make it what he wants. He represents himself, and I think it allows him to be natural when he's actually in the movie. Sometimes he produces, et cetera, but when he's in the movie, he always seems like himself. And I'm not saying all the movies are good, because they're not. But when you're passionate about something and you're authentic, like we were talking about, even with performing, people are drawn towards it. So I will watch every Dwayne Johnson movie and be like, nah, it's probably a waste of 2 hours of my life. But I wanted to see him on the screen, right? And I just appreciate.
Sometimes you just feel like watching a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson action movie.
The same way sometimes I'm just like, I just want to watch a Kevin Hart movie.
Yeah.
Or something that he's in.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not funny. But I get, like, it's not making me, I'm not in tears laughing, but I love what he's built, and the fact that he's made it in a very entrepreneurial decade. Well, even more so into 2020, moving into the next decade. A very entrepreneurial world that we have.
Yeah.
He took that to the highest level where studios and stuff kind of had the monopoly there. Like, you could be big, but you can't really break that glass ceiling, and he just blew right through it. Kind of does what he wants, kind of like a Chance the Rapper. Just like blew right through it. This is what I'm going to do. Yeah. Follow me or get left behind, kind of thing. And
I feel like as soon as The Rock entered social media, because I remember the reason he entered social fully in like 2011, because I remember he came back to pro wrestling as a way to start his social media sort of accounts on Twitter, and then Instagram and Facebook followed. But I think he was one of the first actors to do social media properly, because he's very like, there's people that love his motivational stuff, like, he's very good at poking fun at himself, he's very good at interacting with fans, like,
and it's all genuine.
Like, he'll sign off, like, if you tweet Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and you ask him a question, like, sometimes he'll answer you, like, he's not like weird like that, right? And you know, I do give him credit. Like, he seems like a super hardworking guy. Who knows how many hours he sleeps? Because I've seen his cheat meals. I've seen him like based on his socials that he's in the gym at 4 a.m.
Just have a physique like that and not do anything else in your day. Full-time career.
Yeah, no, literally, it's nuts.
He really made himself the people's champ.
Yeah, totally.
Like, he made himself.
Yeah, totally. There's a certain like, it seems genuine. It does. Yeah. Anuj, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I with this list, I don't know how influential he's really been on the world or on TV or whatnot. I mean, I think I think he seems like a really great guy. Like, I think he's one of those guys that's just, you know, what you see is what you get with him. He's real. I think it's nice to see him represent his Polynesian, Samoan, I think,
half Samoan
culture, even for you know, even more so. I mean, he's kind of a terrible actor. I think he's this generation's Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Like, we needed an action star that we could kind of, you know, both sort of believe but kind of laugh with at the same time. But, you know, he's gone from pro wrestling into, you know, upper echelons of Hollywood. Now he's doing his independent thing. The only movie that I think I really liked of his, like, I find him entertaining, but I've definitely wasted time watching it, but like entertaining nonetheless. But he had this movie, and I can't remember the name. It was where he's a trucker.
Don't snitch.
Yes, yeah.
Snitch,
that was like, it was kind of shocking to see him in that role, that vulnerable.
Yeah.
The only thing I could think he could have done a little bit is maybe actually not be so buff, because he didn't look like the kind of guy that would, like,
you're not a vulnerable guy. Let's be honest.
he actually seemed like, I thought his acting in that was actually quite decent.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I just can't believe this like 240 pound, like, you know, brick wall being in this position right now and being like worried about it, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, grown men cry. That's all cool and everything. It wasn't believable. If he did what Christian Bale did, like in The Machinist, and just dropped like 40 pounds or 50
that guy
pounds.
gains weight and loses weight at a crazy amount.
So, you know, if he took a page out of that, then it'd be a different story. But you know what? Like, more power to him. We need positive people like him in the media doing what they do. So, like, you know, like, all love.
Yeah.
Let's actually do one more. And speaking of great actors, Leonardo DiCaprio. He's also on this list. Actually, one of the quotes that comes out of this article that I want to read is, in truth, Leo is a million things to a million different people. He's the promise of a quality product, the breath of fresh air in an increasingly generic medium, and a throwback to classic cinema all rolled into one. I agree with that. I think Leo is our generation's Marlon Brando. Like, I think similar to The Rock, where it's like, oh, okay, maybe I will watch something of his. I think Leo's one of the actors for me that if I see him in a movie, I'm watching it, because like, I just love 100%. Who he is as a person. I think it was fantastic. Sorry, as I'm looking at the screen, the Cybertrucks. Oh, 146,000 have been sold already. That's nuts. Anyways, not to digress. I think Leo is just one of those guys, man. Like, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a fantastic movie. I thought he absolutely killed it in that. He is sort of the standard bearer when it comes to quality acting, and I think, the 2010s was a great example. Like even I'm looking at this list, like Inception, Django Unchained, The Wolf of Wall Street, The Revenant.
Oh yeah.
Like, dude, those are some of my most favorite movies over the last 2 years. Like I think Inception was on TV a few weeks ago, and I remember just watching it and still being enamored by it. Anuj, what are your thoughts?
I think he's another example of like reincarnating himself, right? Like I think he's been running from the Titanic for most of his career, right? Like and not being pigeonholed in that. And I think that he's done a really good job of just he's a good actor. He's put himself in a place where he takes risks. He does the unpredictable. I think he's managed to align himself with some great directors. I mean, like you end up working with Christopher Nolan, you're going to end up doing something incredible. Like that's just how it is. And I think that he's like there's a sincerity in his acting, but I still haven't gotten to the point where I've mentally been able to shed the Titanic version of him. I don't know what it is. Like he's also got a little bit of this baby face thing about him.
He does.
But you know what, he's I don't know if he's still driving a Prius or whatever it is with him, but like he's been making the environment like, you know, top of mind forever. You know, here's another guy at least for some part of his life seems to live by a certain value too. So I kind of appreciate that. But you know, he's doing all right for himself.
Yeah. Raz.
I think you mentioned Christopher Nolan. I think he's on that list too.
He is. Yeah, Nolan is
impressive. Yeah, I mean, I'm not like head over heels for Leonardo DiCaprio. Like a huge fan.
Not like me, eh?
But I definitely if he's in it, I'm like, that's gonna be dope. I'm gonna go watch that.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's something that I would drop money on to go see in the theater and not think twice about, even if I hated it after. Because I'm like, it's Leo.
Right, yeah.
9 out of 10 times, it's fantastic. It's not just good, right? So
he's very strategic with his choices.
Yeah.
Like you won't see him like I think he averages about one movie a year, but you can tell he's like really thinking about that movie. Like
they're like all Oscar nominees.
I feel like the only real dud he's had this past decade was J. Edgar, right? Yeah. Which was
I didn't even watch that.
Yeah, it was a Clint Eastwood. I remember that was a total dud. Like everyone panned it. But outside of that, like the list I ran off. Yeah.
And then also on the social activism, I guess you could say, side of things, I believe he spoke at the UN.
Yeah.
A few
his
years
National
ago,
Geographic documentary on
the documentary. Yeah. I didn't finish that actually. I'm gonna go finish that.
It's crazy because it's pretty much starts when he's filming The Revenant, and then they have to like go back and
they went to South America twice, right? Just to be able to shoot those scenes.
Really?
And they noticed the water level down and they didn't have as much ice and they had to do some reshooting in Vancouver apparently. Like it was eye-opening because you got to see the impact on his shoot and like how this was a real thing.
And this takes me right back to Chris Martin and Coldplay.
Yeah.
Because those types of things I'm not going to see.
Yeah.
I'm not flying between those two places enough to be like, hey, wait a minute. That water's not where it was before. Like, so it's fascinating that like same thing with like a Chris Martin.
Yeah.
Like, wow, we just left the stadium. Place is trashed.
Yeah.
Right? Like everybody came driving solo or two people to a car.
Yeah.
You know, there's 100,000 people here.
Right.
Yeah. And then I didn't know that about Leo.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating because to me it's the same type of thing. Like I feel like he's taken his clout and he's seen so much that the average person wouldn't have the chance to see or not be in a position to see. And he's taken it in, he's reflected on it, and then he's trying to do something with what he has.
And he's been doing it for years too, right?
He's been doing it for a long time. So people like him, I'm always excited about because I think maybe I'm sensitive to it too because I want my music to pop off and I want to be in that type of realm of entertainment and such that people throw a lot of flack at actors, entertainers, et cetera, for not doing enough. And I think on the flip side, some people say, well, if they blow up, well, then there goes all their values, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, now they've made it. They don't talk to anybody. They don't, and nobody really gets to see the inner workings of how these things come about. So for me, Leonardo DiCaprio, when I saw what he's doing, again, I don't follow him closely, but when I see him pop up and I'm like, oh, that's dope. Because if you're an entertainer, an actor, or anything like that too, it kind of gives you hope. It's like, well, if he could navigate it, like I was mentioning, I follow a very strict set of values for myself, and it's tough. Sometimes I'm like, oh, if I just let this go, I get the opportunity.
Yeah.
But then I look at someone like The Rock, you look at Dwayne Johnson, and you're like, well, he didn't really let anything go, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
Right? And for me, I'm a big supporter of not killing your heroes. Like, I don't want to know all the bad stuff you've done necessarily. If it didn't have to do with me, if it was in your personal life, because you're an inspiration and that's how you should stay in some people's eyes. Yeah. So if I see him do something dope, I'm like, oh, cool, I'm going to use that as inspiration. So with Leo, for me, it's the same thing. I just see him pop up and I'm like, oh, he's speaking at the UN?
Yeah.
Like, look where this can take you, right? Mm-hmm. It's like they're teaching Kendrick Lamar lyrics in university classes.
Yeah. They're like dissecting them.
Right? Like, so for me, when it comes to Leo, that's the type of impact at least he's had on me, and I think a lot of people, is the fact that he uses that clout.
We have like 5 minutes left. Let's talk about the main event topic. Romaine lettuce.
This is the main event, yeah.
Romaine lettuce is still considered something unsafe due to a possible E. coli outbreak, yet it is still sold in restaurants and grocery stores. Quickly, maybe like a 2-line theory as to why you think it's still available and what should be done, because honestly, I'm of the belief that Romaine lettuce should just be taken off the market. Let's figure out why, the E. coli outbreak's taking place. And when it's truly resolved, let's bring it back. But I don't know, like, it seems like they're a little passive aggressive regarding the fact it's still a market. Anuj, just begin with. Let's begin and end with you.
I got two words: big lettuce, man. There's the big lettuce cartel has got to be out there operating somewhere. No, look. It's kind of a ridiculous thing that there's been this many cases of E. coli and yet it's not been pulled. So as silly as it is to talk about lettuce, and I actually don't even really like romaine lettuce. I don't know why it gets all the glory. There's iceberg. There's so many other kinds of lettuce.
It's actually my least favorite lettuce.
Right? Like come on. But the fact that it's not being pulled actually begs a question, which I guess the whole show is about, like what could actually be going on behind the scenes that keeps us on there, right? Somebody's interests are at stake, which is why it's not been pulled.
Yeah, I mean,
actually, Raz.
That's the exact same thing I was going to say. Is I actually want to go research what the bodies that are at play, like what they're doing or how these decisions are made, because one thing pops up with, I don't know, some sort of meat or a country that's sending, like we're importing meat from, and they shut it down automatically. But this has been going on forever, and as much as I want to laugh at the topic, I'm like, oh, you're right. Like I want to know how these decisions are being made. And there's got to be something else.
In full disclosure, my day job, I work for a company that produces products, and whenever there's an issue, they recall it right away. No questions asked. Yeah. Even if it's like, oh, this might have been tampered with, they're like, we're not even going to try.
People are dying from E. coli. Like this is serious stuff.
And that's what makes me concerned is, again, with the fact that restaurants are still serving it, how do you not know that the food's not getting in contact with it somehow?
Well, this stuff's so complicated. I mean, it's a slight digression, but I just read an article about the avocado cartels in Mexico.
Oh,
apparently they've been like diversifying the cartels like crazy, and avocados are one of they're gold. So they're going into into forests. They're cutting them down. They're starting to grow these avocado groves.
Because there's that Netflix documentary too on it.
I haven't seen that yet, but this just article, like it's crazy. It's like mayhem with avocados.
As I had avocado toast this morning, you're making me feel bad.
Yeah, so basically because
loves avocado.
Because middle class America is buying like all these drugs and all these avocados at Chipotle, right? Like all of a sudden, everyone in Mexico
and they're charging you $2 extra for it. That's nonsense. I'm gonna watch that. I didn't know that was.
It's a thing. It's a thing. But wow. Big leaf, man. There's got to be something there.
Honestly,
we need a whole episode.
We could. We can honestly dissect lettuce and honestly, let's just eat arugula straight up. Arugula is my favorite.
Arugula's dope.
Arugula is my favorite. Guys, the 2 hours just flew by. I wanted to thank both of you for joining us. Where can they reach you guys if they want to connect? Anuj, you got an awesome show called Awoken Word. Plug it one more time. And so plug your socials too, man.
Yeah, for sure. So the show is called Awoken Word. It's all one word, and it's a play on spoken word. But it's at awokenword.com. So you can find all the episodes there. We're actually also on Ruckus Avenue Radio, which is out of LA. Shout outs to the team there.
Shouts to Raj, shouts to Sammy.
Yeah, and so you can find me on Awoken Word Podcast, at Awoken Word Podcast on Instagram, and at Awoken Word on Twitter. I also produce music and score films and all that other stuff. So my other handle there is Omnesia. So it's like amnesia, but starting with an O.
Love it. Raz, you have a lot on the go, man. Do you have a new album coming out? You got some new music? I know you got.
Yeah. I got a video. I just dropped a song called Myself about a month and a bit ago. Yeah. Video's done. It's coming out hopefully in the early new year. I'm doing some organization and logistics to get the EP out early next year. I already started the second one. Got a couple shows coming up. I pretty much do everything off my Instagram. It's at razmusic.co. Hit me up on Instagram. You'll see everything that's going on.
It's also your website too, right?
It is, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
But,
Excellent.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank the both of you guys for joining us. If you want to connect with me, it's at Nav Nanwa on Instagram, at @nnanwa on Twitter. If you want to connect with New Theory Radio, it's at New Theory Radio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This show will repeat tomorrow at 8 p.m. and then will be available as a podcast on Tuesday on Spotify, iTunes, and everywhere else. Thank you so much for tuning in, and you will hear all of us next time. Shouts to Jyoti Banu. Peace.